I did a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon FireRed using only the 3 Kanto Starters, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. In a Nuzlocke, if a Pokemon faints, it's dead forever, so these 3 fellas are all I get. The rest of the rules for this playthrough are shown here and in the description down below. Using a random number generator, I decided which of my 3 eligible encounters would be the official starter I get from Professor Oak. Since the number generator put out 3, I head for the 3rd Pokeball, which is Charmander. Kinda weird that these aren't in Pokedex order, but whatever. This selection really only matters for determining which Pokemon my rival Brennan will choose. Since I picked Charmander, the little prick goes for Squirtle. Arguably the easiest starter to face off against, since the movesets on his Blastoise are questionable at best. Anyways, by calling in a favor from my uncle who works at Nintendo, the remaining 2 starters join the team, meaning that it's time for a roll call. We've got Uno the Bulbasaur, Dos the Charmander, and 4 the Squirtle, 3 best friends on a mission to become champions of the Indigo Plateau or die trying. Now by this point you may have noticed the giant zeros in the layout underneath the sprites of each of my team members. Well, have you ever wondered which of these little gremlins is the absolute best to choose as your starter in a Nuzlocke? I sure have, and with my super objective and scientifically proven method, we're gonna figure out the answer to that question once and for all. As we travel throughout Kanto, Uno, Dos, and 4 will compete against each other to gain points by defeating enemy Pokemon in major battles, 2 points for a KO, and 1 point for an assist. At the end of the run, whoever has the most points, assuming they aren't dead, wins the competition and is determined to be, incontrovertibly, the absolute greatest Kanto starter of all time. Don't question my methods, I have a PhD, so you know the science is sound. Comment down below which starter you think will win the inaugural Nuzlocke head-to-head-to-head showdown, patent pending. But before we get started, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, NordVPN. NordVPN is a virtual private network that lets you safely explore the countless wonders of the World Wide Web. By connecting to one of their over 5,400 secure servers, you can prevent yourself from the threats of cyber attacks as you visit the internet's most popular websites. Websites like Yahoo News, MySpace, AOL.com, and more. By using NordVPN to connect to servers in over 50 different countries, you can also access movies, TV shows, and games from all around the world. No more regional locks for you, my friend. And as one of the fastest VPNs in all of human history, you can use NordVPN's NordLynx protocol to safely access this worldwide content without compromising that sweet, sweet need for speed. The best thing about NordVPN is that it is totally risk-free thanks to their 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, with my custom link, you can purchase a 2-year plan and get 1 month free. But that's not all. NordVPN is celebrating their 11th birthday by giving everyone who uses my link the gift of an extra 3 to 12 months added onto their 2-year subscription, completely free. I'm not sure that NordVPN really understands how birthdays and gift giving usually work, but act now before they figure it out. Thanks so much to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get started with the challenge. In the Nuzlocke head-to-head-to-head challenge, Uno immediately gets an early lead by absolutely demolishing Brock's 2 rock types with a Vine Whip apiece. For the first few gyms, Bulbasaur is objectively the best of the 3 starters. Doesn't even matter that Vine Whip only has 35 base power, we still get the one-shots, and somehow we even outspeed Brock's Onyx. So that's an easy 4 points on the board for Uno right away. With the level cap of 21, all 3 of my teammates can now evolve into their middle stage forms. But even with all that extra firepower at our disposal, it's just another Uno sweep against Misty's water types for badge number 2. Starmie is strong enough to tank a few Vine Whips, but with our Leech Seed recovery and Misty's insistence on using Swift instead of going for confusions with Water Pulse, that's 4 more points for Uno, bringing his lead up to 8 full points. But Uno's monopoly ends there, because now it's time for the first actual fight against my rival Brennan in Cerulean City. The rival fights, as well as the fights against Giovanni, will count as major battles, and we'll be including them when we tally points. Since Brennan leads with a Pidgeotto, I lead with Dos, who fairly easily nabs 2 points for himself. That brings Squirtle out next though, so it's off to Uno, who manages to maintain his 8-point lead with a single Razor Leaf one-shot. He also gets another 2 points by taking out Abra, who doesn't know any attacking moves. Brennan's mouse Pokemon is next, so I put him to sleep with a Sleep Powder. This ensures Uno another point for the assist, but it's actually going to be 4 who comes in and kills Rattata with 2 Water Guns. So all 3 of the starters are now officially on the board, though Uno has managed to increase his lead. But there's still a lot of game left to go, and after helping Bill get out of what is presumably a weird sex thing gone wrong, it's off to the SSN, where it's time for another rematch against Brennan. Pretty annoying considering that the level caps between gyms 2 and 3 are as tight as they are. In fact, 4 ends up over leveling as he takes out Brennan's Kadabra. This means we'll have to box him until we've gotten the next gym badge, but if you asked him, I think he'd say it was worth it to narrow Uno's lead by a few points. Plus, the next gym leader is Lieutenant Surge in his electric types, which 4 would be pretty useless in 2 anyways. Dose, on the other hand, is ready to rake in some points. With a lonely nature and access to dig via TM, he can one-shot Lieutenant Surge's Voltorb and Pikachu for 4 easy points. Voltorb outspeeds and nails him with a Shockwave, but at the very least we can take out Pikachu without triggering his static and before he sets up too many double teams. So that just leaves Raichu. He outspeeds and goes for a Thunder Wave, but our held Cherry Berry cures the paralysis, letting Dose dig another hole. Unfortunately, Raichu sets up a double team, and this time it's a bit more effective than when Pikachu did it. Assuming I can survive at least 1 critical hit Shockwave, I stay in and go for another dig, but this is starting to look pretty scary as Raichu goes for double teams number 2 and 3. But the thing about double team strats is that they only work until they don't. And it seems like Raichu pissed off RNGesus because he immediately goes down to a critical hit dig, swiftly ending the battle against Lieutenant Surge and bringing Dose all the way from DFL to being just 2 more kills away from tying with the early game leader. But closing the gap is not enough for Dose. He's riding this momentum all the way to the top. The 4th gym leader is Erica, and her grass types really don't like being burned alive. Can't say I blame them, to be honest. Ever accidentally touched the metal part of a seatbelt in the middle of an Arizona summer? I imagine being burned alive is exactly like that, but everywhere, all at once. Dose can just barely 2-shot Erica's Victory Bell with Ember, while a Lumberry cures the paralysis caused by Stun Spore. Her Tangela appears extra sensitive to extreme heat, so she just falls to a single Ember. Vile Plume is last, and Ember looks like it's a damage roll for a 2-shot. With our Lumberry used up, a paralysis from Stun Spore sticks, letting the Stinky Flower fire off a moderately strong acid on the next turn. Then a second Ember leaves Vile Plume with just a sliver, but it gets the burn, meaning that Erica's final Pokemon falls, and Dose gets a whopping 6 points, definitively bringing him into the lead. Without that burn, Erica would have healed, and we likely would have had to switch to Uno, so it just goes to show you that the winner of this head-to-head-to-head challenge will be whoever wants it more. That was a pretty damn impressive performance from Dose. The early game has been dominated by Uno and Dose, but don't count 4 out just yet. He's about to put some serious points on the board, starting with the first face-off against the crime lord of Team Rocket. Water Pulses get 2 one-shots on Giovanni's Onix and Rhyhorn. Way too many trainers in this game have at least 1 Onix. Against Giovanni's Kangaskhan, I decided it's best to switch to Uno, who's fully evolved into Venusaur, and therefore has more bulk. We whittle away at Kangaskhan with Leech Seed, and we also get a critical hit Razor Leaf, but after a few turns we're sitting at -2 defense from 2 Tail Whips. So, not wanting to get crit by a Mega Punch, I switch back to 4. Though Giovanni, being the mastermind tactician he is, just goes for a special bite. So 4 ends up stealing the kill from Uno, who has to just settle with 1 point from the assist. With the Sylph Scope obtained, it's off to Pokemon Tower, where we have another showdown against my douche of a rival, Brennan. I don't think anyone wakes up and tries to be a worse person, but it seems like Brennan might. For this fight, we're a bit over-leveled and none of his Pokemon are particularly threatening. When it's all said and done, Dose ends up getting the most points, increasing his lead to 5 points. I don't know about you, but he's feeling 22. And to celebrate, Dose gets to finally evolve into his final form, Charizard. So 2 does 4, replacing Uno as the trio's most defensive member. With everyone fully evolved, it's time for yet another showdown with Brennan, this time in Silphco. Most of his Pokemon are now fully evolved, including his lead Pidgeot. But with Dose having learned Flamethrower and found some extra power, we still have the upper hand. 2 Flamethrowers torch the bulky Pigeon, bringing in Blastoise next. Sadly, this poor Blastoise has a pretty pitiful moveset and is easily taken down by Uno. It takes a few more hits than I expected, but that's what happens when your best attacking move has 55 base power. Execute is third, so 4 comes in and kills him with a super effective bite. That then brings in Alakazam, probably Brennan's scariest Pokemon. For now though, his only way to do damage is with Future Sight, and because we managed to kill him and Brennan's last Pokemon Growlithe with just a few Surfs, the battle ends before the Future Sight even happens. So with that impressive performance from 4, all 3 starters' point totals are pretty close going into the second fight with Giovanni. But this fight is just a free 8 points for 4 as Surfs demolish all of his Pokemon. That massive chunk of points brings 4 into the lead for the first time in the entire run. Since the level caps for Koga and Sabrina are identical, I make sure I do everything I need to do before I can just face them back to back. Side note here, when you challenge Koga, he talks about showing you true terror as a ninja master, and then he references how poison brings steady doom and sleep renders foes useless. Pretty weird thing to say when none of your Pokemon have a way to induce sleep. In fact, in all of his appearances throughout all the different games, the only time he has ever had a Pokemon that can put you to sleep is in Pokemon Yellow, where 2 of his 3 Venonets have sleep powder. Anyways, as the battle begins, Koga leads with the first of his 2 Coughings. He's weak enough to be one-shot by a single flamethrower from Dose. Muck comes in second, and this guy can be a massive pain to deal with thanks to his moveset of Toxic, Minimize, and Acid Armor. Dose does a pretty good job at beating him down, but 2 wing attacks come just shy of the KO, letting Koga heal with a Hyper Potion. Since Muck set up an Acid Armor, I now switch to Flamethrowers. We do miss 1 Flamethrower here, but Dose isn't taking that much damage from Sludge in the meantime, so it isn't that big of a deal. Sadly though, another Flamethrower leaves Muck with seemingly 1 HP. Muck also hits Dose with a Toxic, meaning we're on borrowed time. To make matters worse, Koga has a second Hyper Potion, and Dose misses his attack. So all that hard work was more or less for nothing, and now we gotta switch out, as Muck is back to full HP. Uno comes in, but now Muck starts setting up with Minimize and Acid Armor. Fortunately, Uno is able to connect with the Leech Seed pretty early on, which is now slowly eating away at Muck's HP. He also manages to connect with a Sleep Powder, so now it's just a matter of letting the damage rack up. A few turns later, Muck lands a critical hit Sludge, which brings Uno down to just 23 HP. An Oranberry and Leech Seed recovery do gain us back some health, but with Muck still kicking and threatening a potential critical hit, I gotta switch to 4. Since Leech Seed damage ends up being the thing that takes out Muck, I'm gonna give the KO to Uno, and 4 will just have to settle for an assist. But he does get 4 fat points by KOing Koga's second Coughing and his Ace Wheezing with just a few Surfs. That wins us a pretty stressful battle, and also increases 4's lead to 7 points. But Dose isn't losing this competition without a fight. Thanks to his lonely nature, he's our strongest physical attacker, and therefore my best answer into Sabrina's defensively frail psychic types. Our strongest physical move is 102 base power return. Fortunately, that's enough to KO Sabrina's lead Kadabra. Her Mr. Mime ends up hanging on with a Sliver, but then she just sets up a barrier. So even though Sabrina heals with a few Hyper Potions, 2 Flamethrowers are enough to get the knockout. Her definitely Psychic type Venomoth is third, and since she's weak to Flamethrower, we can just torch her for the one-shot. That just leaves Alakazam, a truly scary Pokemon with access to setup via Calm Mind and a very strong Psychic. But not only do we manage to outspeed Alakazam, Return is just straight up a one-shot. Gen 3 Badge Boost is pretty cracked. That's arguably the hardest gym leader defeated, and with 8 points added to his score, Dose is back in the lead. But it's a very short-lived lead, because Blaine is next, which means 4 gets a free 8 points by taking out all of his fire types with just a few Surfs. And then he gets 10 more points from drowning Giovanni's 5 ground types. In hindsight, I probably should have given Uno a crack at this fight, because it's been a hot second since he's had a meaningful impact on the run, and all of a sudden 4 seems to be running away with the game. Especially after the fight with Brennan on Route 22. At this point, I've accrued enough money from beating up the working class of Kanto to be able to piss away all my earnings at the casino for the Ice Beam TM. This lets 4 easily kill Brennan's Pidgeot and his Execute, which takes those points away from Dose. When it's all said and done and we've made it to the Elite Four, the Water Starter is at 62 points, a good 25 points ahead of Dose, and 40 freaking points ahead of poor Uno. Oh, how our early game hero has fallen. But Uno, Dose, and 4 are teammates first, competitors second, and we've still got the Elite Four to beat. So far, we've made it here without any casualties, but will our luck continue to the end of this challenge, or will the Elite Four claim the life of one of our beloved friends? Let's find out. Our first opponent is Lorelei and her ice types, though she's somewhat of a water type specialist as well, which isn't great for Dose. So instead, Uno is finally going to get some late game points on the board. Against Lorelei's Dewgong, we set up a Sunny Day. This is immediately overtaken by a Hail, which ruthlessly pelts our last place contestant. But after setting up another Sunny Day, Dewgong just sets up a Safeguard. This is great for preventing status conditions, but does absolutely nothing to stop the full-powered one-turn Solar Beam that shreds through Dewgong's blubbery body on the next turn. Slowbro is second and also gets blasted to bits with a single Solar Beam. I was a bit worried that Lorelei's ace Lapra would survive a hit, but nope. A 120 base power stab move is just a tad too strong. Jinx is fourth and doesn't take super effective damage from grass type moves, so it's off to Dose, who gets an unsolicited kiss that puts him to sleep. Jinx must be wearing that L'Oreal chloroform flavored lipstick that you hear so much about. Fortunately, we've got a Chesto Berry to wake up Dose, and then on the next turn, he torches Jinx with a super effective flamethrower. That just leaves Cloyster, but her special defense is so low that a neutral flamethrower is enough for a clean one-shot. That's Lorelei defeated, and a few points added to Uno and Dose's totals. Next up is Bruno and his fighting types. Once again, I lead with Uno since Bruno's lead fighting type happens to be one of those fighting types that has a quad weakness to grass type moves. Classic fighting types, right? After that, Hitmonchan comes out. I set up a Sunny Day as Hitmonchan goes for a Rock Tomb to drop our speed. This is seemingly the world's slowest Hitmonchan because we still outspeed even at -1, though unfortunately a Full Blast Solar Beam isn't quite enough for the one-shot. So Hitmonchan heals as we go for a Giga Drain. After 2 Rock Tombs, Hitmonchan does outspeed, though a resisted Sky Uppercut does nearly nothing as a second Solar Beam takes out our punchy assailant. Next up is Hitmonlee, another Pokemon with pretty solid special defense. A Mega Kick does enough damage that if he crits with the next one, it could potentially kill Uno, so after a Solar Beam leaves Lee with a Sliver, it's off to Dose. A Mega Kick miss grants us a safe switch, meaning that Dose is at full HP as a Wing Attack seals the deal. Machamp is next, and since he knows Rock Tomb, I gotta switch to 4 for his Elite Four debut. Bruno's ace sets up with Bulk Up, so this could get a little scary here. Our Surf does really solid damage, and then Machamp just goes for another Bulk Up. So as long as a second Surf gets the KO after Machamp's Citrus Berry activates, we shouldn't have a problem. But it's gonna be close. Surf comes out, and thankfully it's enough for the KO. That's good, especially because Bruno's last fighting type is 4 times weak to water type attacks, so one last Surf wins us the fight against the second Elite Four member. Third is Agatha. She leads with Gengar and I lead with Dose. This is his last real chance to catch up to 4, who still has a massive 23-point lead. A Flamethrower leaves Gengar with a sliver of HP, but fortunately she just goes for Double Team. So even though Agatha heals, we can use 2 Aerial Aces, which never miss, to take out Gengar before she gets off another attack. That brings in Golbat next. But once again, a Flamethrower from Dose is just shy of the one-shot. This time he's punished with a Confuse Ray, so I switch out to 4 on a Limp Air Cutter, and then he just steals Dose's kill for 2 points. Seems a little unfair, but them's the rules. Arbok is third, so I figure it's a relatively safe switch back into Dose, who dodges a Screech. And it's a good thing that he dodged that, because somehow our super effective Earthquake leaves the giant Serpent with a sliver of HP. 0 for 3 on these one-shots, Dose, but this one is genuinely surprising. Had Arbok connected with that first Screech, a -2 Sludge Bomb on the next turn would have really hurt, but instead it's just another Screech before she goes down. That brings in Gengar number 2. She also survives a Flamethrower, but then just misses a Hypnosis. Wouldn't have mattered since Dose has a Chesto Berry, though it's nice that we get to conserve it for later. Berries are pretty hard to come by in Fire Red. With another Flamethrower, we finish off Gengar number 2, and then, against Agatha's 5th and final Pokemon Haunter, we finally get a one-shot, winning us the battle and netting Dose a nice 9 points. Unfortunately, that's not enough to tip the scales in his favor because Lance's Dragon types are next, meaning it's open season for our resident Ice Beam spammer. Though it is Uno who kicks things off against Lance's lead Gyarados. He sets up Leech Seed and brings Gyarados down to about 50% with Giga Drain before we switch to 4. That was probably a bit unnecessary since Gyarados is just going for the world's weakest bites, but you might as well be safe. After Leech Seed damage, an Ice Beam seals the Pseudo-Dragon's fate. Lance's 2 Dragonairs are next, but they both fall to a single Ice Beam apiece. Dragonite is 4th, so he's met with a 4 times super effective Ice Beam to the gut. Impressively though, he survives. And then completely squanders the Gift of Life by going for a Safeguard. Shame. Lance heals twice, but eventually Dragonite falls and he's left with his final Pokemon, Aerodactyl. The fossil Pokemon outspeeds to hit a wing attack for 36 whole damage, before we retaliate with a Surf that does a heck of a lot more than 36 damage. That wins us the final fight of the Elite Four. There's still one more fight though, and it's against none other than frickin' Brennan. It's time for his reign as champion to come to a premature end. Let's do this. Brennan leads with the always present Pidgeot, so out comes 4, ready to fire off another nasty Ice Beam. But Pidgeot is fairly bulky and survives the hit to retaliate with a Sand Attack that lowers our accuracy. This could be scary since Brennan heals, but 4 didn't get a 26-point lead by missing attacks like a punk. He easily connects with the 2 Surfs needed to drown the champ's first Pokemon. That brings in Exeggutor next, so it's off to Dose, who gets put to sleep on the switch. But we obviously have a Chesto Berry, and then we burn the stocky Palm Tree to a crisp with a single Flamethrower. That brings in Brennan's fearsome Blastoise, so I switch in Uno, who takes a light shower in the form of a Hydro Pump. 2 Giga Drains are enough to take out Blastoise as he just sets up a Rain Dance. Brennan's poor starter never gets to take advantage of his mystically summoned Rainstorm. But we do. As Alakazam comes in, I bring in 4. He gets hit by a pretty nasty Psychic, but on the next turn, we manage to somehow outspeed Zam and get the one-shot with a rain-boosted Surf. You played yourself hard, Brennan. That was a very scary Pokemon that you made much easier. Rhydon is 5th and obviously goes down to a ×4 super effective Surf. So, just like that, Brennan is down to his 6th and final Pokemon, Arcanine. In a desperate attempt to stay in the game, he goes for an extreme speed, but 4 is simply too bulky. With one last Surf, the fluffy pup falls, and we've won not just the battle, but the entire run. And with that, the winner of the very first Nuzlocke head-to-head-to-head showdown is for the Blastoise with a grand total of 86 points, claiming the title of the objective best Kanto starter. I knew that Blastoise would get a lot of points in the late game thanks to Blaine and Giovanni, but I didn't expect the results to be such a blowout. Did you guess the winner correctly? And did you enjoy me adding this little competition to an otherwise pretty straightforward challenge? Let me know in the comments down below. And thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, it'd be great if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Or don't, I don't know. But I do know that you should follow me on Twitter and Twitch to keep up with streams of my future challenges. You should also subscribe to my highlights channel to get highlights of the challenge I'm currently streaming before it's cut down to a video on the main channel. And you should consider subscribing to my Patreon, which is the best way to directly support the channel and comes with bonus content and early video access. The links to everything are in the description below. Stay tuned for more Nuzlocke videos, and until then, remember to always play around the critical hit.